Well, ladies and gentlemen, I bought some Apple stock today, all right? I want to show you what I paid per share on these Apple shares I bought here today. I want to talk about if I'm planning on buying more shares. I want to talk about why I bought the specific amount I did today. I want to talk about why I'm very bullish on Apple over the long term and why I will plan on probably building this into a very, very big position over time. We're going to talk about all that. This is just an Apple dedicated video, so if you enjoy Apple stock and learning about Apple stock and hearing my opinion on it, this is definitely going to be the video for you, all right? So first off here, Apple. So I bought 35 shares. I paid about $145 per share. Unfortunately, if I would have waited about 2 extra hours, see, I knew I should have slept in a little later today. If I would have slept in an extra 2 hours, I could have gotten them for about $142 a share. Oh well. That was just over a $5,000 trade there. So first off here, I haven't owned Apple directly for quite a while. My wife has a pretty big position in Apple stock, but as far as me directly owning it in any of my accounts, I haven't, but this is my first chance to kind of buy in, and I thought $145 looks about right, all right? We'll go through why I'm bullish on Apple over time in just a minute. Now, why specifically $5,000? I think this is going to be a good learning point for this video. Why did I do $5,000? Why didn't I go ahead and why didn't I do $10,000? Why didn't I do, I don't know, $50,000? Why did I specifically do $5,000 with this first initial position, all right? Well, what I like to do nowadays for the most part, almost for like 99% of the time, if I'm going to start a position in a stock, I like to buy $3,000 to $5,000 worth of that stock initially, okay? Why do I go ahead and do this? Well, what I have learned over time of me being in the stock market for 10 years is I am really bad at picking a bottom in a stock, okay? I can't do it for the life of me. I never ever buy a stock right at the bottom. It never happens. Almost always like either a couple days later or a couple weeks later, a couple months later, that stock will go another 5 or 10 or maybe even 15% lower. So the fact that I'm buying Apple here at $145, which is my initial position, I can almost guarantee you today will not be the bottom for Apple stock, okay? You know, if you have a huge position in it and you're hoping it goes up, you know, good for you, but I'm just telling you, like, more than likely, Apple right now is what we call a falling knife, okay? It's a falling knife stock. Most stocks are honestly in the falling knife category right now. Like, that's just the way it is. Most stocks have fallen 30, 40, 50, some even 60%. So most stocks right now are falling knives. Apple stock absolutely is a falling knife. Like, this is a stock that wasn't, not too long ago, it was like 230 bucks, right? That was just a few months ago, and now it's all the way down to 145. It's a falling knife right now, and when you try to catch falling knives, which I love to do, I catch falling knives all the time, generally you're not going to get it right at the bottom, okay? It's probably going to go lower, and most of the time when I buy my initial stake in a company, it goes lower from there, okay? It goes another 5, 10, maybe even sometimes 15%. So what I like to do is I like to get an initial position built, all right? $5,000 something here like Apple stock, and then let's say it goes another 5% lower, somewhere around that, goes to, let's say, like the $135 range, all right? What will I go ahead and do? I'll probably at least double up my position in that situation, so I'll at least buy another $5,000 worth, if not more money than that. So all of a sudden I'll get, you know, basically in the stock for $10,000. That brings my cost basis, you know, just assuming I bought $5,000 and $5,000, that brings my cost basis net at that point to $140 on the stock, all right? And if it goes lower and lower and I still love the stock as much, which I probably will because I love the business fundamentals and all the different things that we'll go into in just a minute, then I increase a position. A lot of times I'll double up the position. So also then I'll make it from a $10,000 position into a $20,000 position and then into a $40,000 position until I start getting it between, usually like a good sized position for me is anything between like 50K and 100K in a stock. And that's what I consider like a good size position for me. And hopefully I'll get Apple to that point at some point in time. And I should get the opportunity because right now it's just a falling knife. And the whole negativity around iPhone, that's probably not going away anytime soon. Those points are just going to get reiterated. Analysts will come out, downgrade the stock more, say why it's going, you know, much lower, why they'll lower their price targets more. And you just kind of get this gauntlet of bad news and it just kind of gets wrapped up into this, okay? Now, why would I start at 145 and not just hope it goes down more? I think it's dangerous to just keep hoping it goes down and never start an initial position, because at the same time, if you think you're always going to pick the perfect bottom, it's completely unrealistic. No investor has ever done it in stocks. No investor ever will do it in stocks as far as picking the perfect bottom. Oh, Apple hit $137. That's the absolute bottom. Let me buy in now, and just, like, it's so unrealistic, okay? So you got to get a starting position built at some point in time. When I look at Apple stock, it's very undervalued for the long term and on the short term basis. So when I look at both those things, I say it's worth starting a position, all right? So now I want to get into Apple stock a little bit and kind of like my mindset around Apple stock. And we're going to kind of go through some numbers here around Apple stock and around the iPhone and kind of just the other businesses and whatnot, and kind of the way I look at Apple stock, all right? So first off, in regards to Apple stock, all right, I won't even put this up on the board. I like the management team there. We got probably one of the best management teams of any public company out there, as far as a very diverse group of people. Very, very brilliant management team. They run the company very well over the long term. That's how you build one of the biggest companies in history. That's just how you do it, okay? So if I look at Apple, let's think about iPhone first, okay, since that's what everybody wants to get caught up in. Let's say in 2019, they're stagnant, okay? Let's say forever. Let's say they never grow iPhones again. There's just a stagnant business for them, which I think is unrealistic. I believe iPhones will grow again when they come out with the 5G iPhones, but that's probably not for at least 9 months to maybe 21 months away. So that 5G iPhone is still quite a bit of time away, all right? But I think they'll grow again. But let's just assume 2019 is, there's just a stagnant year. 2020, same thing. Like, they just keep moving the same amount of iPhones, okay? So I would assume they'll probably do around 200 million iPhones sold in 2019. And let's assume they just keep doing that. Average selling price, we'll have to see where average selling price comes in. And I don't think actually Apple's going to disclose that anymore. I think average selling price will probably be somewhere around $1,000, okay? Somewhere around $1,000 average selling price, because obviously the iPhone XS, that starts at $999, and then if you go up in memory, it goes up more expensive. The iPhone XS Max actually starts at $1,099 and can go all the way up to $1,449. If you look at the iPhone XR, that's the cheaper iPhone. That one starts at $749, and as you go up, you can get into the 800s on that. So let's assume maybe they do about $1,000 ASP, somewhere around there, roughly. 200 million iPhones. So basically, you can carry the 3 zeros over. That would be around $200 billion in iPhone revenue alone right there, okay? And if it's not as good of a year, or, let's say things are even worse than that, maybe they do about $160 to $180 billion. That's if it's a real bad year for iPhones in 2019. They should still do about $160 to $180 billion in revenue if it's a bad year. If it's just decent, they should do around $200 billion in revenue, all right? So that covers iPhone, and that's kind of what you're looking at if iPhone is a stagnant business, which once again, it probably will be until 5G comes, all right? And you could imagine they'll clear at least probably 35 to 40% of that money actually down to the net income line. So needless to say, that's a lot of profit, all right? And that just covers iPhone there, all right? Let's just put this as iPhone. Now let's think about their other businesses. Let's think about iPad. Let's think about Mac. These type of businesses are just consistent. I don't, they could grow a little bit here and there. I don't expect them to grow big or anything like that. Those are just consistent businesses. People that love the iPad, like myself, that use it all the time, like they get another iPad when their old ones, isn't good anymore, or when it breaks or something like that. Same thing with people with Macs. I think those are just consistent business lines. So if I'm looking at Apple, I see a consistent business line in the iPhone. Is it booming like it once was when they were moving nearly 250 million iPhones per year? No, actually, I think they topped out at, it was something around, I think it was around 233 million iPhones was when they had a record year, if I recall, all right? So are they moving that? No, but consistent iPhone, consistent iPad, consistent Mac, somewhere around there, consistent businesses, all right? Remember, this is a low PE company. I think it trades at a forward P of 9 or 10 or somewhere around there, all right? Now, let's think about their other businesses. Let's think about, I love to think about services, all right? This is something that hasn't been brought up as much, especially by the bears. So services is a business that's exploding for them, and a lot of that money just goes straight to the bottom line. In this latest quarter, okay, they did $10.8 billion in services revenue. They just announced that yesterday as part of what Tim Cook came out and said. $10.8 billion in services revenue. That's an all-time record. Basically, that same quarter last year, they did about $8.4 billion in revenue for services. So needless to say, we're talking about a massive, massive increase. And keep in mind, iPhone's down big year over year, right in that last quarter, right? So iPhone was down big quarter over quarter mainly because China is very weak, right? And they still grew services at a ridiculous rate. That's something to be very bullish about there. So on a run rate, this should be easily within a year or two into a $50+ billion run rate. And maybe upwards of $100 billion type run rate, probably within 4 or 5 years, all right? So that makes me very, very bullish on Apple over time as they continue to increase the services revenue, and so much of that is honestly profits at the end of the day, all right? Now let's think about Apple Watch. Apple Watch is another main growth pillar for the company. Apple Watch is growing very fast. I think something around sales were up something like 40% in the last quarter, something like that. Tim Cook, mentioned in that interview with CNBC yesterday. So needless to say, Apple Watch is a very fast growing business. Now, Apple Watch isn't a huge revenue business because one, they're still, moving like, let's say, tens of millions of units they'll probably move in 2019 versus hundreds of millions with iPhone. And also the Apple Watches are generally sold for $300, maybe $400, so much less of a price than iPhone. So it's not that type of business, but it's a very solid, consistent, growing business now. AirPods should have a very strong year. They actually sold out of AirPods a lot during the holiday season. So AirPods should be a growing business, especially as they launch new AirPod generations in 2019 and 2020. Okay, so needless to say, when I look at Apple stock, I'm looking at a stock that's very, very undervalued as it is right now. I'm looking at iPhone business that, I'm not expecting it to grow. It might even shrink slightly, for the next year and a half. But I 100% believe iPhone will grow again when 5G happens. But if iPhone never ever grew again and was just a stagnant business, I would still be more than happy with Apple shares where they're at now, because they also have these other consistent businesses, and mainly because of the services business can grow at a phenomenal rate even when iPhone doesn't grow, okay? iPhone shrunk year over year as far as amount of iPhones sold, and they still grew services at a ridiculous rate. That's a $2.4 billion increase year over year in services revenue, all right? And keep in mind, they got a lot more stuff in the pipeline as far as services go. Apple Watch is growing very nice. AirPods, anything that's home connected devices like, the HomePod, things like that, those are growing. Then I look at their massive buyback which is taking a lot of shares off the market. That helps boost up the earnings per share, okay, as long as they can keep net income around the same as it is now, especially if they can increase it over time, which over the coming years, I absolutely expect Apple to increase over time. And then on top of that, you're getting a stock that already pays over a 2% dividend yield. And when I look at this, they hardly pay out any of their money toward dividends right now. I think this is something that will increase dramatically over the next 5 years. And I think, if you're looking at a dividend yield of something like 2% right now, I think over time that's going to increase dramatically. Let's assume like Apple stock price never moved over the next 5 years. It was still like $145. With how many dividend increases they'll have over time, I would expect the dividend yield to be a 4+% dividend yield, assuming the stock never moved or something like that, okay? So this will become a very nice dividend paying company over time, and I don't think that's going to, I think every single year they'll continue to increase that, okay? So when I look at Apple overall, I'm kind of looking at this as definitely a stock I'm very happy with buying here at the current prices. And if it goes lower, I welcome it. I would love to add more and more shares. I would love to build this into like a $50,000 to $100,000 position, as I talked about before. And then on top of that, the cheaper the shares get, the more and more shares Apple can buy back with those massive buybacks they have on right now. So I'm very confident in Apple's business model over the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years into the future. If it's one of those stocks, if I bought it and I went to sleep for like 10 years and I woke up, like I would be happy I own that stock. It's just every once in a while this whole talk about iPhones can't grow anymore, it happens, okay? 2013, I remember it happened. Apple can't grow iPhones anymore. Then all of a sudden iPhone 6 came out and all of a sudden, the numbers got ridiculous, okay? Then 6S came out and people were like, oh man, maybe they can't grow iPhones anymore. And then iPhone 7 came out and they were like, maybe they can't grow iPhones anymore. And then iPhone 10 came out, they were saying the same thing. And then iPhone 10 actually did really solid numbers. And then, now it's the same thing. And every once in a while, Apple just doesn't have a super cycle in iPhones. Most years, it's not a super cycle. So people shouldn't expect, a ridiculous increase in the number of iPhones. iPhones. In my opinion, when 5G comes, that will be the next super cycle in iPhones out there. All right, guys. So hope you enjoyed this today. Hope you enjoyed just kind of learning about my perspective on Apple stock and kind of where my head is at with that stock in general. Love the company over the long term. I would love to buy some more shares. I hope it gets cheaper. I think if I'm trying to make short-term stock predictions, I think it can probably fall to the 130 to 120 range. Will it fall all the way down to under $100 to like the 90-something dollar range where it was over 2 years ago? Probably not, but you never know with how rough the market's been, and you never know if we could actually have a legit recession happen, a global recession. Something like that happens, maybe you can get Apple stock back into the 90s or something like that. But if I'm looking at it, I think the most realistic case is probably in the 120s to 130s, which I would love to load up some more shares. So anyways, let me know what you guys think about Apple over time. Let me know if you've bought any stock yet, if you're planning on buying any stock, kind of where you see the stock going over time. I would love to hear from you guys in that comment section. As always, hit a thumbs up if you enjoyed this today. Thank you for watching and have a great day.